All right, welcome to all of our attendees for the next episode of our Fuel Up series. We're going to be talking about winning high value accounts, the sales strategies that work. We've got an awesome panel with me today. We're going to get to them. We're going to have them introduce themselves so you know who we're spending some time with today. But first, just a couple housekeeping items for our webinar today. Want to keep it interactive. We've got a couple polls that we're going to pull up throughout the webinar. Would be great if you interact with those on there for us so we can kind of get a feel for what the audience is thinking. And then also we're going to have some Q&A as well after our panel discussion. So you can actually drop down into that Q&A box at the bottom of the chat and throw in your questions. So if we're talking through something specific as it relates to our topic today on winning high value accounts, would love for you to jump in, have some questions. We're going to get to as many as we can on the back end of our panel discussion. So we're going to be talking today, like I mentioned, winning high value accounts, and we're going to be diving into a lot of different things related to commercial maintenance contracts in today's competitive landscape. So we all know the market's crowded, saturated, if you will. Everyone says they deliver quality service. Everyone says they're competitive on pricing, they're reliable. But when the bids are on the table, what actually tips the scale in your favor? So we're going to be talking about what happens when you're not in the room, so to speak. So I love our panel to introduce themselves. Kayla, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Lara.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I am Kayla Lujan. I am the Vice President of Sales here at Down to Earth Landscape based in Orlando, Florida. I've been in the industry for 16 years, and like many of you, I started in the field as a gardener, and I've worked my way through the industry holding various roles in operations and sales.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla. Really appreciate you joining and pouring into the industry today. Lara?
Thanks, Shawn. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lara Moon. I am the regional growth leader for the Midwest region of Brightview Landscapes. I've been with the company 23 years, and similar to Kayla, just kind of advanced my way up through the company. Started in a sales role in the field and have held various leadership positions along the way. So hopefully today we can give you some good insight, whether you're a salesperson, sales leader, operations, looking about growth, all the above. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Lara. Really appreciate it. Steve, and you can round us out, sir.
Yeah, sounds good. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Shawn. Steve Patrick, Vice President of Sales for Sunrise Landscape out of Tampa, Florida. I'm not from the landscape industry, so I've been with Sunrise just a tick over 2.5 years, but come from a background of building a high-performing sales team and looking forward to the dialogue amongst the group today.
Awesome. That's great. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I've worked with each and every one of you in different capacities throughout my career, so it's really great to get the full group together. So on to our topic. So really, whether you're a sales rep in your next big account, your large commercial account, an account manager responsible for renewals, or really a sales leader looking to protect margins as you scale the business as well. We're going to talk through a lot of these strategies today. And I don't think there's a better place to start in the sales conversation than top of the funnel. So we want to really get into positioning yourself at the top of that funnel in a crowded market. So Kayla, I want to come to you first and just kind of get some of your thoughts. So when you're going after a high value RFP specifically, you're up against companies offering the same core services. What are a few of your go-to strategies for making your proposal really stand out from the others in the industry?
Yeah, so honestly, as a great seller, you have to have a pulse on these large opportunities weeks or even months before the RFP comes out. And Shawn, that could be a whole session on its own, if I'm being honest. But, for that very first touch point, for me, there's two very important things, which is curiosity and credibility that are going to come into play. At this point, the property manager, the board, the decision makers, they're really going to be analyzing everybody to figure out who is that right partner for us. So when it comes to credibility, you don't want to show up alone as a seller, especially if it's a big site meeting or that first impression. If the job is qualified and you've done your homework, you want to have that conversation with your leadership team to make that strong first impression to determine who should come with you, not only from the sales side, but also from the operations side as well. Now, for us, the references in our past success, they come later unless they ask. So the meeting, that very first meeting, is really about them and not so much about you as a seller, as a company. So that brings me to my second point, which is curiosity. So if you show up to these meetings and all you're doing is holding that RFP and you're asking scope related questions, you're not going to win. You have to be curious about them. You got to learn what's important to them. And you also have to understand how they're going to see their ideal partner working with their community. So really by asking those questions and gathering those insights, you can tailor your message or your proposal in a way that's going to speak directly to their needs. And that initial information, that's what's pure gold.
That's awesome feedback, Kayla. I always termed it in my mind like you can have scope related discussions or you can have business like this discussion with how are you impacting their business. And I would say, I mean, from my experience, would love your feedback on it, but I would say most of the time, individuals from our industry going in to sell, most of those naturally revert to scope related questions versus business related discussions. Is that what you've seen out there?
100%. I used to joke that back when I was a direct seller, I don't know how I won any business because all I did was ask scope related questions until I had a coach who helped shift my mindset to I got to make it not about the scope and really about understanding the client and why are we here? Why are they really looking to switch landscapers and what are they looking for moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's an important takeaway. You can always talk about how many mows or how many stick edges on a site, right? And those are important things to know. I'm not necessarily saying you shouldn't find that information out, but the majority of your conversation sticking around the business and how it actually impacts them, the landscape and what they do. Those are great points, Gail. I appreciate that. Lara, would love to get your feedback here, right? So Revenue's brand carries a lot of weight, but you still need to earn every contract, right, that you're up against. So how do you balance leveraging brand equity with really customizing your pitch for each specific opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, brand equity is only going to get you so far, whether you're the small player, medium-sized player, large player. It's only going to take you so far. So for me, the key to any successful contract proposal is somewhat to what Kayla was saying, tailoring it to those customer needs. And for me, and what I'm always preaching and teaching is this starts in qualifying. This is way ahead of when you're in the contracting stage. This is way ahead of even when you're in the proposing stage. During that qualifying process or discovery, it's really when you win that deal. Okay. And I always ask myself or my sellers, what are the 2 to 3 things that we uncovered during that discovery or that qualifying meeting that we can solve for? If you can't answer that question, I'm saying all the time, then why are we moving forward? It's probably not qualified. We probably can't set ourselves apart. We probably can't differentiate. So it's really critical that your sales team have specific, impactful, deep questions ready to go past scope, like Kayla was saying, that truly uncover what are those items that will allow us to differentiate ourselves later when we get to that point. Because if you can't solve for something, you're probably just going to fall into the price bucket like everybody else, right? And like I said, brand recognition, it's only going to take you so far. But that's really not, relevant to how buyers buy today. I mean, it's few and far between that I bought from you because you are Brightview or Down to Earth or Sunrise, right? It's much more about what we uncovered during that qualifying process, Shawn, and then how we tailor the solution and customize, to use your word, customize each opportunity, proposal, contract to those needs or to address those needs.
Yeah, I like what you said there about the price bucket. Like you're automatically going to end up there if you don't make yourself go someplace else, right? And I think a way to move yourself away from the price discussion, I think, like, let's be honest, like price is always going to matter to the buyer, right? They're always looking for maybe not the lowest price, but the best value, maybe we'll say. So I think that's always going to be like par for the course. But if you really want to get out of that price bucket, I think you hit the nail on the head. Some of those questions that you asked, if you frame them in the right way, they're going to put you at a different level, maybe, right, than all the other people that you could be going up against in that process. That makes a lot of sense. And then from a qualifying standpoint, Lara, like, from your mind, right, do you envision winning the deal early in that process, right? Can you talk a little bit about the qualifying process? Like what makes a job not qualified, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that you really do. I mean, not literally win during that part of the process, of course, but I really do think that's when you set yourself apart. I think that those questions are business questions, to Kayla's point. How does landscaping impact your business? A lot of people are very thrown off by that question, right? But you keep peeling back that onion, right? You keep asking the questions after that. And even if they don't understand, what are you talking about? It's just landscaping. And I understand these are some of the ways that they impact our other clients. And as you give them some examples, maybe they'll start talking. And again, you're listening for those 2 to 3 things that are going to set you apart. Or we talk pain points, right? Or we talk differentiators. But if you can't uncover those, again, how are you actually going to solve for anything? And then again, you're frankly, you're the same as everybody else. So I would say asking the right questions is an art, but then also translating them into something with impact is kind of the second piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, well said. I think that's gold. There's two-step process there, and can't miss that second step. I think that's great feedback. Steve, how about you? Any recent examples where maybe a small change in like the actual positioning helped you win a bid, or just based on your experience, you mentioned right, you've been in the landscape industry and you've been in other industries. Would love to hear just your thought process on maybe some small changes in positioning as well.
Yeah, we had a recent healthcare win where we took a bit of a different approach. We focused on how services could really create a visually appealing environment for them and enhance patient experience. So, looking at the saturated market, which is healthcare, there's lots of places people can go for patients' care. So, we wanted to make sure that we could align directly with the client's missions, but we wanted to keep patient safety at its utmost importance while keeping crews and then their workers safe while on site. So just adding additional context to that, we did that through like our vast past projects that we've done with similar healthcare facilities across the portfolio by just showing proof in the pudding through evidence testimonials from similar projects to build credibility. And then what we did to just tie a bow on it was just show how landscaping can contribute to patient satisfaction to differentiate from some of the other competitors within the industry.
Yeah, I think that's good, especially in the healthcare vertical, right? You've got all these different verticals. You've got commercial, you've got industrial, you've got multifamily, and you've got healthcare. I remember the first time when I got involved in the healthcare side, like somebody said to me, and it was the customer patient satisfaction, right? And like I was obviously caught off guard and not prepared, right? Most of my life, essentially. But essentially when they said that patient experience was important to me, it was a light bulb, right? Oh, so like how we care for the landscape actually impacts them. And there's actually a score, right? A scoring system for them internally at the health system that we rate into as landscapers. But if you don't know that, you can't really ask those questions to understand how you can impact that score. So I think that's great feedback there, Steve. I really appreciate that. All right, let's move on. Lara, I'd love to come to you on, the proposal side of things. So once you got their attention, right, the proposal itself has to steal the deal. And in your experience, Lara, how much winning comes down to the presentation versus the pricing side of it?
Yeah, great question, Shawn. So as I mentioned earlier, I do feel very passionate that jobs are won and lost during that qualifying process. However, I think, like I mentioned, the ability to translate that into an effective proposal is a skill, and it's a skill worth mastering. Okay, so you want to make sure your content is easy to digest, concise, impactful. It's critical for a successful proposal. Too often you see long proposals full of words that really don't say anything, right? I joke about that all the time. I mean, how often do you get something for your home or personally, and it's what does this even say, right? And when it's not easy to digest and concise like that, what do? You go right to the price, right? You skip over everything. So my suggestion in best practice is really including a cover letter, very direct to the point. This is also where I summarize those items during discovery or qualifying that I have a solve for, or that we feel like we have a solve for and I'd like to discuss with them. So it's upfront, it's clear, it's bulleted, it's right off the bat. So if they do, even if it is concise and clear, they skip that middle fluff, for lack of a better word, that cover letter hits on the points I want to hit. So I think putting that up front versus burying it is much more effective. My other key point here, Shawn, is mission critical. And I can't stress this enough with my reps. And I understand it's not 10 out of 10 or 100 out of 100, but it is critical to present in person. I cannot tell you how many reps settle for an emailed proposal just because the client says, just email it to me, just send it over, right? If we fall into that trap, it is asking for a lower close rate. I understand technology is our friend. Hello, Attentive.ai. But in this case, specifically to proposing, you're just asking that buyer for 15 minutes. Let me review the details. Let me explain, our different differentiators. I don't usually say that with them, but I'm asking them for the 15 minutes to go over everything. If anything, it might throw some flattery in there. Hey, I want to make sure that you feel confident explaining this to your boss and the other decision makers. I want to make sure you look good. That doesn't hurt as well. But that is going to differentiate you in and of itself from those who literally mail it in or email it in. So, this is where you sit across from them and you say, I heard you say X, and this is our solve for it. I heard you say Y, and this is how I think we can help you with that. Right. So taking the time to propose in person, even if it's, and I think, back in the day, we've set an internal goal of 75% or more. I understand that sometimes it's a portal bid, sometimes it's required. Okay. But when it's not, which I would say is the majority of your opportunities, take the time and you will see an improvement in your close rates. Guaranteed.
Yeah, some great points. I mean, the in-person thing, I don't think it can't be stated enough. Like when I hear of it, like whether it's a new sale or whether it's an account manager, I mean, maybe a little different with an account manager, but still in person is better, right? Like I always think about like a new sale you mailed in or you emailed the actual proposal. In my mind, sub 10% close percentage, it just goes in that bucket, right? And I think back to the qualifying piece, like something that you could put in your tool belt is like, qualifying, like, will you meet with me in person when we actually pull the pricing and proposal and information together, get that commitment? Better yet, set the date right on the calendar, have them accept it while you're sitting in front of them, potentially.
Absolutely. That's why that solid qualifying meeting or discovery meeting, it serves so many purposes, from the actual upfront of the sale to setting that tone for later in the deal, like you're talking about. You can accomplish all of that up front and save yourself and your team resources so much time. Because I look at it like this. Let's say small $25,000, $50,000. If they're investing that much in their landscaping or snow removal, depending on your area, and they won't meet, how serious are they? Right? Is this serious? Are you a number? Are you a price check? Are you up against their incumbent and they just need that other bid? I mean, these are kind of those small check-ins that you can do along the way to, again, just save your time, and again, it will translate to close rate.
Yeah, no, and that's what we're looking for, right? We don't necessarily want to put more paper on the street. We want to increase the close percentage of what we're actually already working on. So I think those are great points. Kayla, would love to come to you and maybe talk a little bit about, right, the role, what role do templates and tools and I guess I would say internal processes play in really delivering that polished proposal quickly without the personal touch or maybe customization that we've kind of already alluded to.
Yeah, so I've discovered that no matter how many internal processes, support systems we have, sellers do not like admin work. Like if I ask my team, like who likes admin work, it'd be 0 hands up. So on the large deals, it's even worse because it's really overwhelming. So it's important as, an organization or as a company that you make it as easy as possible for your team while also keeping it impactful and personalized based on, everything we've been talking about that you've learned during that qualifying process. So for us at DTE, we do have that standard, format in, to maintain quality, to maintain those brand standards, but it still leaves room for that creativity and customization. One of the other things too that we do internally is the expectation is you start that proposal immediately. As soon as you get the RFP, you start kind of your checklist of exactly what you're going to need. Don't wait until the week of or days before it's due. That's a recipe for disaster. You will not win that way. I will say if your $1 million proposal looks the same as the $50,000 deal that you delivered last week, again, you're wasting your time. And then really the last thing with proposals in the internal side is support is key. So sales leaders, if you're not helping your BDs through those large deals, including the admin piece, you got to step up and help, the extra set of eyes, that guidance to really make sure that they've customized it fully based on everything, you've learned during that initial process. That is how you're going to win those big deals, along with, again, the call to action, everything that's really been stated.
Yeah, it's almost like when you get it done early, you can almost give it time. Like in my head, I always think I need this to marinate a little bit, right? Like I need to think through think through my conversation? Did I tie all the customization pieces out to what they needed? And then almost envision yourself talking back to the customer and walking through the proposal. I almost do the estimate, like I always do the estimate the same way. Like if you have a really big site, like I don't need to be on that site one time. I probably need to be on it 2 or 3 times if I can, because I've always found like a site when you're estimating it, it shrinks when you get on it for a couple times. Like you walk into a huge university, like for the first time, it's going to take 4 years to do, right? That type of thing. But then you get on it a couple times and you're like, okay, we've got a process here. We can grid pattern this. We have a system. I feel like the proposal side of it can almost be the same way. You get out ahead of it, you get it done, you build in some of those customizations that you mentioned with some of the guardrails of the brand identity. It gives you some time to just think about like, okay, is this actually good? Is this going to win the deal, rather than just working to maybe respond to the RFP essentially?
Exactly.
Awesome. Steve, when you think about, proposals that win, any thoughts around like design or content elements, that maybe the client always notices or potentially keys in on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we went through about a year ago with the help of marketing. We just took a hard look at our previous proposal. Really poked holes in it, asked for lots of feedback inside and outside of the company, and we made lots of fun changes to it. The aesthetics to it, the length of it varying based on contract sizes, like Kayla was talking about. The feedback we've received since we revamped it based on the aesthetics, the visuals, the concise content. It's tailored to meet the customer's unique needs. The BDs still have skin in the game to add their own flavor based on size and scope of the opportunity, but the feedback since we've done that has been outstanding. We've probably cut about 70% of the material that was in it. We just didn't find that it was impactful to the client at the end of the day. So we continue to tweak it over time and improve the experience with feedback, both from our sellers and our account managers, but our customers as well. But the design from the appeal makes the proposal easy to navigate. And one of the things we really wanted to achieve, back to some of the points earlier about we've got to present our proposals in person, but there are times where stakeholders that cannot be present during those face-to-face interactions. We wanted the proposal to be able to stand alone so that it could hold its own merit and value for those stakeholders that couldn't be present.
Yeah, having a document being proposal that speaks for you when you're not in the room, I think is pretty important. And then I went through a phase. I don't know if you guys did, but like, I mean, one time I sent out a proposal that had like 50 plus pages, right? And then, feedback I got from the customer was like, it's good you sent me all this, but I didn't even look at hardly any of it, right? And so I think that like with all the stuff coming at us, especially, if we're talking about large maintenance contracts, you have a pretty astute buyer, sometimes a procurement department, many times a procurement department, right? They're looking at a lot of stuff. So if you can create value in a simple document that doesn't take them a day to read, man, I think that's way more valuable than just throwing, everything in the kitchen sink on that proposal and having it really dialed in and really pointed to what that individual customer based on their vertical needs. I think there's also, Steve, what are your thoughts? Like, maybe just percentage basis. If you were to think about your proposal, like you want some guardrails on your proposal from a content standpoint, like let's just take healthcare, right? You want it to be oriented towards healthcare, but how do you build in like the autonomy that you mentioned with your business developers that actually went out and had the conversation to customize it specifically for that deal? Any like just general high level thoughts there?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, a lot of us that are, on this webinar, our companies, we grow organically. There's the acquisition component too. So like a big thing for us was consistency across the brand. And then for us, we wanted to lock down certain content to where we wanted to keep our brand and specific verbiage that's in the proposal. There were certain non-negotiables that we didn't want to change, but there are certain pieces of the template that we have where BDs can tailor it to certain verticals so that they still have that own flavor and spin that they can add to it, and be able to make modifications based on customers' unique needs and things that they've been searching for.
Perfect. Yeah. So part of it's locked down, protect the brand identity, and have it really focused on that vertical, but still some sections where customization might make sense and be really prescriptive on the actual conversation with the potential customer.
Yeah, to
Awesome.
Kayla's point about, the admin time suck of this too, just, making it easy for BDs to upload staff content, making sure there was a consistent library for our GMs, AMs, and all the people that are supportive of the function, making sure that we had consistent photos, bios, all those little things that add up to make it a unique, high quality deliverable to the client.
Great. Beautiful thoughts there. No, appreciate that. All right, let's jump into our live poll here. Let's go ahead and pull that up. And while we pull that up, keep in mind, if you have any questions about what we've gone over so far, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. Looks like we have a couple already in there, so thank you for that. All right, so poll question: where do you see the biggest challenge when bidding on large accounts? So differentiating on value, building trust with new prospects, getting your proposal noticed, or protecting margins against aggressive pricing. So again, where do you see the biggest challenge when bidding on large accounts? Would love for you to participate on this, William. We'll see the results here in just a moment. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results here. Okay, great. So it looks like, if I'm looking at this correctly, it looks like protecting margin against aggressive pricing is a big piece of this. And then next up would be differentiating on value, and then getting your proposal noticed, and then building trust with the new prospects, essentially. Okay, so biggest challenge definitely on protecting margins against aggressive pricing. I think a lot of what we already said kind of goes back to that, and separating yourself and kind of getting yourself out of that price bucket is key to that. Awesome. Well, greatly appreciate everybody joining in there, and feel free to drop any questions in there as we go down below. All right, Steve, would love to come back to you. So post sale, turning contracts, into renewal. So winning the contract is one thing. Obviously, keeping it is another thing. So, where, Steve, in your mind, where are the non-negotiable habits your team follows to really just build trust after the contract is signed? I think the team all has a high, right? Like when they win a new large maintenance account, but there's a lot of work that went into the proposal and the estimate and winning the job. But there's probably maybe more work that happens, right? And ramping the job up and making sure you keep that job. Any thoughts against that?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time about just going back to like qualifying the opportunity, in sales, making sure that we're delivering ops a great partnership that they can take and, hopefully have forever. So for us, making sure we sold something that we can deliver on, we can be proud of what we sold, and the customer can be proud on we're delivering on our professionalism and communication. So I think the BD to account manager handoff process we have, just continuing to tighten that and just making sure that it's an in-person handoff. That's kind of a non-negotiable for us. There's times where we can't do it in person, but we want to make sure we're going through everything that the customer highlighted to us as pain points, areas that were problematic on the property, and communicating that internally and externally to the customer of where we can find some quick wins on the property. And, in a lot of cases, we're taking over properties that kind of batted down a little bit. So we want to make sure too, we're giving the customer realistic expectations of, hey, here's how quickly we think we can improve some of these areas, but being open and honest about, hey, if something's going to take 3 to 6 months, like, let's not just make something up. Let's give ourselves a conservative timeline that we can hold ourselves accountable to. One of the things we recently are working on is just tightening up that AM handoff process of just more of a robust questions that we want to have as part of the process. Like, what were cool things that we interacted the customer like? What were personal things that they brought up that when we hand this over, we built the relationship with the client with a rapport perspective. Let's make sure we're setting up the account manager for an equal opportunity for success within the new win. And then just making sure that we're delivering and executing. So I love when my BDs check in after the first visit, making sure the first bill, the first invoice, all those little things that could be a pain for somebody we never met with. For Sunrise, like we're meeting with a property manager or a board, we're not usually dealing with their AP person. So making sure that first invoice is handled with ease too, that we're owning everything we can control on the sales side of the process to make ops life as easy as we can make it post deal.
So much gold in what you just said, Steve, because this is where things can fall apart midair very easily, right? That sales to operations handoff is so important. And I really like what you said. I want to reiterate it. Might not do it verbatim, but essentially sales delivering operations a situation or a sale that they can actually succeed on, right? I think that's a lot of times where trust can break down internally in organizations is, sales gave us this, we didn't have all the information, ops didn't come through on our promises. There's a lot that can go wrong at that linkage. So I think tightening that up and always continuing to work and make that better, whether that's via documented process, SOP, technology, whatever it might be. I think that's a super important piece. Lara, when red flags pop up mid-contract, that never happens, right? But what's your process for turning a potential churn, into an actual secured renewal? Any thoughts against that?
Yeah, it never happens, Shawn. I don't know what you're talking about. I think my first piece of advice is, in what we talk about a lot internally, don't see red flags as an automatic bad thing or a deal breaker. I choose to believe, and I think everyone should, that a red flag is better than no communication at all, right? They're giving you the chance to fix something. They're giving you the chance to address the concerns. How many times have we not been given that chance? And there is nothing more frustrating, right? So making sure there's an established escalation process helps. So once you've acknowledged red flags, making sure there's an established escalation process certainly helps, and will vary, of course, based on customer or job size. So it's probably not a one size fits all. You might have a one size fits most process. And then as you're selling larger deals, obviously you probably want to include some additional escalation points as well. In addition, as Steve was alluding to, aligning sales and ops with the action plan quickly and clearly is critical. So let's say that they go to the account manager with this red flag, and the account manager doesn't share that with the ops manager, the branch manager, the business developer who has the relationship, right? We have to be transparent and open with the whole team, because everybody's got to do their part to recover, right? Everybody might not have a specific action in that moment, but to ensure that we keep that client, to keep that long-term relationship intact, I think it's really important to communicate that action plan, what it's going to look like internally. Because very seldom, not never, but very seldom, I think, is there an issue that cannot be recovered. But our ability to take action, take accountability, follow up with that clear communication and action plan with the client in a timely manner. I mean, I know I just listed 4 or 5 things, and they're probably equally important, but it can make the difference between a loss and a retention of that job. So my last thought is, a genuine apology never hurt anybody either. I think a lot of times, ego gets involved, finger pointing can happen. And, again, taking that ownership, a small apology, just acknowledgement. Sometimes people just want to be heard, right? At the end of the day. And so again, from the active listening, the hearing what they're saying, acknowledgement, owning it, and then again, that quick escalation and action plan open to the whole team so everybody can do their part, and can really save jobs.
Yeah, it's amazing what just listening does to de-escalate the situation. If you come in with all these fixes, and you might not even know what the actual problem is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, great stuff there. And I think one of the major things I just writing some notes down here, Lara, like almost training your team, like red flags are a good thing. Like it's your goal to find them, right? Because if we can't find them, we can't remove them. And there's never a situation where there's probably not at least one somewhere, right?
Right. Think of how many times they've given you no feedback and then you lose the job and you thought, I thought everything was fine. You thought they loved me. They love the account manager. We had a great relationship. We were there every week. Site looked great. So in my mind, communication period is better than none. And so if that means a red flag from time to time, take it with stride and, dive into it head on.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good feedback too. Like if you're taking notes, the silence can be deadly, so to speak, right, from a customer. Makes a lot of sense. Good. All right, Kayla, over to you on this renewal topic, right? You mentioned before renewals can be like an avenue, right, for upsell opportunities. That can be where a lot of this comes, based on your experience and your past. What's worked for you on this side?
Yeah, so renewals are a great opportunity to, revisit your services and strengthen that partnership. And one of the things that Steve talked about was the initial job handoff, right? And that startup, as we like to call it. Beyond that, it's important that you're doing those routine meetings and site walkthroughs throughout the entire contract, cycle, not just the startup and the renewal time. Often, on the business developer side, they're only on those kind of two pieces and they forget about the middle. A lot of times, they collect their commission and they're on to the next one, right? But the business developer, you can really play a key role here in terms of maintaining those relationships. We all know that CAMs sometimes have multiple properties. So if you sell one job with a CAM and you're obviously maintaining that relationship, your potential to grow outside of that job is great. But also, maintaining that relationship with those decision makers on that specific property is going to help address any challenges, early, but also it's going to ensure that the community stays happy and it's going to position you for a smoother renewal process, when that time comes. So those regular face-to-face meetings, the town halls, as a business developer, if you're still there through that whole contract cycle, it's going to continue to build that trust and show that, you're really a true partner, not just the landscape, vendor. I was actually at a community this week and it's a $2 million community. So it's up for bid. The RFP is not out yet. And their biggest pain point that we heard was our current provider is just going through the motions, right? So for me, I'm like, yes, big thing I can push on. But the board members stated what really resonated that relates to this is that they felt like their enhancement proposals and their pricing was just aggressive and it wasn't focused in the community's best interest. A plant was dying, they were replacing it with the same like plant. They weren't going for what's the root cause. They weren't trying to identify what are the real needs of the community and give them a solution beyond the obvious. So it's important to have that creative, out of the box thinking. And as a business developer, when you're staying engaged throughout that entire contract, you can help spot those issues and those opportunities in order to coach your operations team on how to capture that additional revenue.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback there, Kayla. And like, I want to tie it back to something you said earlier, right? You mentioned, my first note was knowing your large opportunities life cycles. Because a lot of these, I mean, when you think about a $500,000 landscape job, or you think about $1 million or $2 million job, typically they're not RFP every year. Usually it's a 3 year or a 5 year cycle. So knowing that is like step one, right? Where their cycle is, so you can make sure to participate. Because if you don't, you might not get another opportunity unless that current provider falls down, essentially. So I think knowing that, but like what you just said, right, of maybe offering some fresh ideas. You don't necessarily just have to begin the sales process when the RFP is issued, right, on these big jobs, right? You can start to build trust with that contact or that point of contact that you have, and offer some fresh ideas. Because I know, like early in my career, like we would have different people come on the site that weren't normally on it. So if I was an account manager of a site, we would have an ops manager that wasn't necessarily on that site all the time come and look for different ideas, because it just, you kind of, it gets stale and you see the same things over and over again and you might not notice everything. So I think that's great feedback. Any thoughts to like selling when it's not sales time? I know that's a real broad question, Kayla, but would just love to get your thoughts on, like, if you're not in the current RFP process, can you still make an impact, right, as you prepare to become in the RFP process?
Yeah, I mean, we're always selling every day, right? I think just, as business developers, part of what we do when we're out connecting with people, we're trying to build rapport, we're trying to create and establish those relationships. But it really kind of goes back to the first thing we talked about, which was the curiosity. So if you're genuinely curious when you meet somebody and you're positioning yourself by asking the right questions, the opportunity for a sale, whether it's a maintenance reoccurring sale or a one-time opportunity, it's gonna come up. You don't have to feel like, oh, I got to walk in here and I have to ask about palm pruning or seasonal annuals or how can I help you with your enhancement opportunities. If you're asking specific questions that are going to lead to that, it will lead to the sale. So again, it's about being more of that strategic seller versus my mission is to go sell maintenance contracts and scope and get the RFP in hand. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. I always tie the word transactional to scope conversations and strategic to business conversations to one of your first points. And I think the more you can be in that business and strategic conversation side, the more larger deals you're going to win for sure. It makes perfect sense. Awesome. So communication, I think, and transparency, right? That from a renewal standpoint, it builds loyalty, and it's easier for the clients to believe in your work and know the work that you do and actually renew with you. So I think those are some great points presented by the panel. Kind of wrapping this up here, question 4. I want to make sure we keep enough time for some Q&A. We've already got some questions down there in the box. Would love for you to go ahead and drop some questions down there if you have any additional ones. But as we kind of prepare to wrap up here on our last question, let's move it to like the technology side, right? So Lara, I'd love to come to you first here. How are your teams really leveraging, tools to improve speed, win rates, systems processes, just kind of everything under the sun as it relates to actually winning these large deals? Would love to get some feedback from you on this.
Absolutely, Shawn. We have implemented numerous tools to improve with inefficiencies across the entire sales process. So we've got some prospecting tools that help to identify prospect information more quickly, opportunities that are out there. I mean, each business developer or rep can only get, so far and do so much prospecting in a day or week. So, technology has offered some tools and assistance with that early stages of prospecting. Obviously, tools like Attentive and others, inferior to Attentive, of course, are on the market for estimating support. And that's been a huge help with efficiency and turnaround time and accuracy, in our estimating portion of the sales process. And then similar to, what Steve was saying earlier, we also are focused on making sure we've got those pre-approved proposal templates. These are all tools that will just save you time, allow to make sure the reps have consistency in their sales process, right? In general, I think the more developed your sales playbook or toolbox, for lack of a better term, is, the more your reps can focus on what matters, right? And that's being in front of the customer. So again, just the more we can rely on technology, that sales toolbox, things of that nature, I think that really can allow them to focus. However, I do want to just point out, we have to remember though that tools are just that. Their implements, their gadgets, their devices, their software, et cetera, right? They cannot and they will not replace the human element. So just like I said earlier, getting in front of people to qualify, getting in front of people to propose, the reps still have to hustle and do the work to get in front of these people. That's where the sales happen, right? So it's not behind the monitor. It's not across the phone. So again, I look at it as tools are tools. They free up time for strategy. They free up time for that in-person connection, and allow for a faster client response, which I think all in turn will improve close rates.
Yeah, no, I think what you mentioned too, right? I think, at least for me, when somebody says playbook, I envision this huge document, right? And I think based on where you're at in your sales process as a company, as an attendee, you might be a $2 million business, right? You might be a $5 million business. You might be a $200 million business. I think playbook might mean different things to different people, right? So in the vein of keeping the proposal simple, your playbook doesn't have to be built in one swipe, right? You might just start with the qualifying process. How do you qualify a job, right? Maybe any additional thoughts there, Lara?
Absolutely. No, you just hit it, Shawn. I mean, I think it took us 9 months to completely build out our playbook. So anybody thinking, oh, great, I'm going to hang up and go build our playbook and we'll have it ready for Monday after Labor Day, not going to happen, right? It definitely takes time. How you break down a playbook can vary, right? It can be vertically based. It could be sales stage based. It could be, position based. I mean, there's a million different ways to slice and dice your playbook, but just take it on a bite at a time. But what that's going to do, again, whether you have 1 rep, 3 reps today, 30 reps today, right? Your goal is growth, right? You wouldn't be here if your goal wasn't growth. So again, if you won today, you're probably hoping I have 3 by the end of next year, right? Because that means we grew and we've got more opportunities for folks and our business is thriving. So to ensure that consistency, something like a sales playbook or toolbox can really help, again, take that recreation of the wheel, that inconsistency, that sometimes unprofessional look, off the streets. So I think, again, take it a chunk at a time. It is nothing that's going to happen overnight. It should be a collaboration between sales, operations, leadership in the field. I mean, it's everybody's got to come together, I think, to put their 2 cents in to ensure you've got your best possible output or product.
Yeah, well said. Start somewhere. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be an encyclopedia. Just start somewhere. I think that's important. Great. Kayla, would love to stay on the technology side. I've always loved the term speed kills. And I think as technology gets implemented into the industry and things get quicker and quicker, I think that's going to become even more important. So would love to understand, like, how are you using automation in your current process to get, speed to proposal in the actual sales process?
Yeah, so automation has been a total game changer. I think out of the 4 of us, here talking today, how many of us had a wheel in our car when we first got into landscaping? All of us, right? So way back, when I was Valley Crest selling, I had a wheel in my car and we had an estimator who was in the field and I was measuring mulch bed spaces and turf bed spaces. Like that was part of my business development training. And now it is completely different. Our teams can focus on what they do best, which is building relationships, not only with clients, but also with our internal teams, whether that's, operations or we have an internal estimating team as well. But, Shawn, working directly with you and your team at Attentive, we get our estimates back faster than ever. And I'm not just saying that, that is God's honest truth. For example, $1 million deal, we would send it off and it would take us 3 weeks to get something back estimating wise. And now that's cut in half, if not even faster. So what that does is that has allowed us to have conversations with those key stakeholders or those decision makers in advance prior to us even submitting our proposal. So we're actually putting us in a better position because we're getting feedback on where we are potentially to their budget. So, we're not waiting, coming down to the wire on submitting our proposals now. So total game changer for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, like what you can do with extra time, and no matter if you're automating property measurements or some other manual task in your process, even if it's on the operational side, invoicing side, whatever it might be, the what you do with that time back is so valuable, right, and key, and it makes complete sense. I think like one of the cardinal sins of sales, right, is like you try to get your sales teams and your business developers to limit their non-sales time, right? Admin, the estimating side, how if they're involved with that at all. You want them to be knee to knee, hip to hip with potential customers, essentially, and that's the whole idea. So I think I think the people that are going to win in the industry and the companies that are going to win just have this paradigm shift of like always looking for whatever manual task we can replace, right? That's not high value. We can replace and automate that and have a system process for it. Making that a continuous thing throughout the next 5, 10, and beyond years is going to be super key because the ability to automate things is going to become more and more prevalent. And I think the people that aren't resistant to change and adopt that and test it and have a testing mindset, in a good position, in a better position, I would say. Awesome.
Totally.
That's good. Good, great feedback there, Kayla. I appreciate that. Steve, rounding us out here, from the technology side and automation side, like on the automating the estimate and automating the property measurements, what's been your experience with like how that impacts win rates?
Yeah, I love love what the ladies just said too about just leveraging the tech stack and increasing the velocity of the deal, and then also the time saved, right? Our BDs are most dangerous building the relationships and on the operations side, right? Time spent for GMs to coach the AMs, focus on key clients. So love the time savings that this helps speed up the proposal process. Really allows us to submit bids quickly, and then also acts as a belt and suspenders with our large clients to just marry up the on-site property visits that we're having, and knowing what levers to pull when we get that back for the estimate. I love the support we do get from Attentive, part of our quarterly sales meetings, which is great. And then, to Kayla's point, working with you guys as a partner, if we need something and it's urgent, you guys can, within our own uh, box for our stuff that we're submitting, move it up to the top of the list if we need your help. So the customer service, the partnership that we have with Attentive, it's extremely valuable. And the final 2 points I would say would be just the accuracy and the professionalism. Helps reduce the human error component of estimating, and professionalism. We put the takeoff map in all of our proposals, and clients are impressed with how we estimate. They get a bit geeked out of seeing how all the different square footages it puts up, and it helps us truly differentiate at the final stage of truly how we estimate throughout the process to deliver the best experience and estimate that we could provide to them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Steve. I think that's like, one thing that when we go to some of these, quarterly meetings and chat with our customers, it's certainly the speed and accuracy is important on like when we talk about the takeoff side and automating that process. But like what you can do with it in the sales process, right? Use it as a touch point with the client. Ask them to verify boundaries. Helps you have another touch point with the customer. It puts you in a position where you're like a tech forward company essentially, and you're providing them information that they probably don't have, or if they do, it might be severely dated as well. So I think, when you put those into contracts, I had a conversation with a customer this morning, right, about, creating Exhibit A, placing that site map in Exhibit A in every contract, and the amount of risk you're mitigating, right, by having that in the document, having it initial, is huge. I estimated a site in my past, and we estimated it, and it was like 1/3 of the site that wasn't near that actual piece of property. We didn't have a site map in the actual contract, and we ended up eating 1/3 of the actual total side of the property for the next 3 years, right? So it can really hurt you from a P&L standpoint, from a crew morale standpoint, not hitting the hours that you estimated, those types of things. So I think including that into like your contractual arrangements is an important piece as well. So I think all well-rounded, essentially use that in the sales process, use that in the contracting process as well. So well said by all three of you. I really appreciate the comments and the thought on the technology side. All right, so let's move over to our Q&A process. We've left ourselves. I've left ourselves 5 minutes when I said we'd leave ourselves 10. So my apologies here, but we'll get to as many as we can. So maybe Kayla, let's start with you here. Often a proposal promise ends up being something the ops team didn't know about, right? How do you ensure your reps and account managers carry forward the promises made during the sales process?
Ooh, this was my biggest pain point back when I was an account manager. I did not like my business developer because of this. So this resonates deeply with me. So for us, it's really about making sure that the team is involved early, right? So as soon as a deal comes to the table, as soon as we start sending it off to our estimating team, operations is involved right away. And that's not just, regional leaders or branch managers. The account managers are also involved in those conversations because we want full transparency of what has happened during the sales process, what we've talked about. We'll review the contract with our internal team to make sure that they fully understand, what's going on. But then, like we've talked about today, is that job handoff, right? It's important that everybody from your team is there and they understand before you sit down with the client what's included, what isn't, so that when you're in front of the client having that meeting, we're all on the same page, we're all moving in the right direction. And that eliminates a lot of those, well, my salesperson said, right? So that's what's helped us in that situation.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Kayla. And I specifically asked you that question because I think at the very beginning, one of my notes here was, I think it was on the credibility side that you were talking about, right? You kind of mentioned more of this lone wolf, or who are you bringing with you to the meeting, right? So I think that's such a thing that's underutilized. As a business developer, I would want it to be the account manager and operations sale. Certainly you get credit for it on paper, but like they're going to be the ones that are going to take these promises forward, right? And having them in that sales process early and almost having that ownership piece in there man, it can solve like 80% of what you typically walk through if you don't do that.
Totally. It helps with buy-in too. So when you sell a large job, if that account manager isn't in the loop, they are going to be terrified when they find out that you sold a large job. So by having them in it and excited, it makes that transition process way easier.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Steve, we got a specific question for you. You mentioned the handoff process and servicing client pain points to ops, how to better involve ops or productions in reviewing high value proposals before they go out. Who should be responsible for translating client pain points into execution on the ground? Good question.
Yeah, I mean, we making sure, I mean, all starts, Kayla talked about it, sales and ops being attached at the hip and having good, strong partnerships internally just helps that process move further. So we're making sure that that's the BD, if I heard the question correctly, it's a BD responsibility. Like they're held accountable to making sure they are coming prepared to the handoff with everything. So, kind of similarly to what Kayla said, I mean, it's egg on our face, right? And the next future opportunity, the BD lends over to the AM, they're going to be like, it's another one from Steve, right? We don't want that experience. So we want to make sure that that client experience gets set off on the right foot, both internally and externally. So as we continue to evaluate that checklist, making sure we have all the right touch points in there to make sure that the handoff is a true success.
Yeah, we definitely don't want one of those from Steve again, right? That's good. That's well said. Because I've seen that happen, right? Like you've got somebody that doesn't communicate well, they don't involve the team up front, and then all of a sudden, boom, they drop it on everybody's plate. It's inconsistent information. Man, if you want to see trust break down quickly, that's a surefire way to do it.
Yeah, and the
Well
final
said
piece
there,
I would
Steve.
just add to the question too would just be getting ops involved early. It helps it helps everybody. And I think as salespeople, it's not them trying to come in our backyard, right? It's just them acting as a partner with us to just sell a good experience.
Yeah, and two, I would say like leadership, right? If there's leaders on the webinar here today, like it's your responsibility to weld those two together. Certainly, there's tasks that the business developer can do. Certainly, there's tasks that the operations to do. But like sitting down with those teams and setting the tone, like my expectation is that you will work together. You are on the same team. We will have SOPs, and I will not have any of this nonsense of pointing fingers back and forth. Like having that real conversation, man, that needs to happen by the leadership team as well, just to set the tone. I appreciate that, Steve. That's great insights. I know we're at time, but Lara, I would love to maybe wrap up here with you. We've got a question. When you're bidding on a property, where you don't have much of a relationship with the manager decision maker, what is the best way to showcase your company if an in-person meeting is not possible and not be in that price bucket? So I mean, this with big deals, this is probably more likely to happen because you might be sitting somewhere in Texas and they might be in New York or something like that. Any general thoughts to wrap us up there?
Yeah, on the larger one, Shawn, where you literally can't get in front of the decision maker, maybe it's like you said, out of geography or in a portal bid type situation, go beyond submitting the bare minimum, right? So often they send an RFP or, a list of questions and, or they say, here's my pricing sheet, just fill it out. Never do they say, almost never. I can think of maybe one time in 20 years. I mean, never do they say you cannot include additional information, right? So that is where we talk to our reps, still include your standard proposal. Maybe it's a simplified down version, but still get them some additional information on your company. Put in front of them what you really want them to see. Still include that cover letter, right, with the 2 or 3 points. Again, maybe that's the only thing they read and they don't look at anything else. But I'm going to make sure that we go above and beyond to provide information even when not asked. Okay. And then really quickly, I know we're on time, on those local opportunities where the people just say, I don't have time to meet, or, I'm just not going to take that meeting. I really encourage everybody to encourage your reps, push back on that. Say, I don't know that we're going to be able to, give you a proposal then. I cannot tell you how many more times than not they come back and say, okay, we'll meet with you. Or they'll say, well, why not? And I'll explain our reasoning, right? It's really important that we understand your needs, we understand your pain, we understand how things are going now, walk the site, blah, blah, blah. And so more than 50% of the time they come back and say, okay, I can give you 30 minutes, right? So don't be afraid to walk away is almost the advice there, because more times than not, you don't actually end up having to walk away. And again, that's a business choice. We can't do that on every single one. You gotta be selective. But on those more local, regionally based, where it's more of just a wall than an actual fact, I do encourage you to push back a little bit, because it tends to work out in your favor.
Yeah, great advice. Color outside those lines. They're not always like, maybe they're dotted lines. They're not firm black lines written in Sharpie. I think that's great advice, because a lot of times we just think, okay, this is the way it is. But I think if you ask for it and you make a case for it, if you never do, the answer is always no, essentially. So I think that's fantastic feedback. All right, we are at time. We're a little over time. I appreciate everybody staying with us. But if you'd like to talk to a member of the Attentive team and get a demo of the actual auto measure product, feel free to scan that code, and that'll take you to our calendar to book some time with one of our team members. Kayla, Lara, Steve, thank you so much. You've just poured a ton of value into, especially the front end of the sales process, into the industry today. So really appreciate you joining us. And to our attendees, thank you for sticking with us for a little extra time today. Really appreciate it. I hope everyone has a great close to the week and a great holiday weekend. Everybody take care. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.